All right, let's dive into this pretty complex topic. The potential limits of, well, everything really.
Mhm.
Population, industrial growth, food production, you name it. The Earth's ecosystems. We've got some really interesting material to dig into, especially I think these updates to the World 3 model. You familiar with that at
Oh
all?
yeah, World 3, that's the computer simulation, right?
Exactly. It was originally created way back in the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
And now this Guy Lakeman, he's been refining it, giving us this, well, kind of a glimpse into the future. It's pretty wild stuff.
Yeah, fascinating model. I know it's sparked a lot of debate over the years. The original World 3 came out of the Club of Rome, their book, The Limits to Growth.
Right, right.
And it basically simulates how these five key global systems all interact. You've got food production, industrial output, population growth, non-renewable resources, and of course pollution. And what Lakeman's done is, well, he's brought it into the 21st century, added in things like climate change, even the impact of urban heat islands.
Urban heat islands. Okay, now that one's new to me. Break that down a bit. What are we talking about?
Imagine, like a city, but it's this giant heat sink. All the concrete, the asphalt, absorbing all this heat, radiating it back out, makes cities way warmer than the areas around them. And that intensifies heat waves, leads to all sorts of problems. More energy consumption, air pollution, the whole nine yards. And Lakeman's model actually suggests that one way to mitigate this effect is to, well,
Yeah.
decentralize cities.
Mhm.
Smaller, interconnected townships.
Huh. That's a pretty radical idea. But it makes you think, right? If something as simple as how we design our cities has that much impact, what other limits to growth are we missing? Are we bumping up against? What's Lakeman highlighting?
One of I think the biggest takeaways from his work is how interconnected all these systems are. Like exceeding the carrying capacity of one, say overpopulation, can just
Mhm.
trigger this whole cascade of consequences in the others. More people, well, that leads to more pollution. You deplete your non-renewable resources faster, less land for food production, it all just spirals.
Domino effect across the entire planet.
Exactly. And the model suggests that we might have already overshot a truly sustainable population level, which would explain why we're seeing those consequences play out now. In fact, there's even a potential scenario where global population stabilizes around 500 million people.
500 million. Whoa, hold on. That's, well, back to the Stone Age practically. What would that even look like?
That's a question that sparks a lot of debate for sure. Some say less pressure on resources, less pollution, ecosystems get a chance to recover. But then you've got these questions about economic systems, social structures, how would civilizations even function? It's heavy stuff. Lakeman doesn't really dive into those specific scenarios,
Right.
but he emphasizes that population stabilization, whether it happens naturally or we plan for it. It's critical to consider for long-term sustainability.
Right. Yeah. A lot to unpack there. And, we haven't even touched on the big one, climate change. How does Lakeman factor in all the unpredictable weather, the
Yeah.
increasingly intense patterns we're seeing everywhere?
Oh, climate change is deeply embedded in this updated model. Rising sea levels, you've got the droughts, the floods, cyclones, everything we see on the news every day. And the model shows how these events, they directly hit food production, wiping out crops, less land for farming.
So it's not just this slow decline. It's like these sudden shocks, these extreme events that just
More.
throw everything off.
Exactly. And remember those urban heat islands we were talking about? The model links them directly to these extreme weather patterns. The argument is they intensify the heat, the pollution, which of course feeds into climate change. It all comes back to that interconnectedness.
Right. Yeah. It's all connected.
Well,
Okay. So we've painted a pretty, well, sobering picture here.
yeah.
But does Lakeman offer any solutions, any adaptations, any reason to be hopeful?
Lakeman's actually a big believer in, human ingenuity,
Yeah.
especially when it's technology. He sees huge potential in things like aquaponics and sea farming to increase food production, but in a way that minimizes our environmental impact.
Okay. That sounds promising. Can you break those down a bit? What are aquaponics sea farming?
Sure, so aquaponics, simplest terms, it's growing food and water, but it's a step beyond just hydroponics because you're bringing fish into the equation. You create this closed loop ecosystem. Fish waste provides nutrients for the plants. Plants filter the water for the fish, very efficient. Less water, less space than traditional farming.
Like a little mini ecosystem mimicking natural processes, huh? I like that. And sea farming.
That's essentially cultivating food from the ocean. Things like seaweed cultivation, shellfish farming allows us to tap into this vast resource, the ocean.
Makes sense.
That-
But switching gears a bit, I'm curious about Lakeman's take on like global initiatives, any large-scale projects out there that he thinks could help us address these limits to growth?
Interestingly, he's a proponent of the Belt and Road Initiative, that massive infrastructure project that China's leading.
Right, right.
He believes it has the potential to support a more sustainable and a more distributed population because it improves connectivity, access to resources, especially in developing countries.
Huh, interesting. Hadn't thought about the Belt and Road Initiative in that light. But it makes sense. We need to be thinking outside the box here.
Absolutely. We need to explore every option. Individual actions, global collaborations. It's the only way we'll create a sustainable future.
Couldn't agree more. So before we move on, what are your initial thoughts? Anything standing out to you as particularly important, surprising?
I think what really strikes me is how Lakeman's work challenges our assumptions about progress, about growth. We tend to think of it as this linear thing, always upward, but his model suggests there are limits. And exceeding those limits, well, it can have some pretty dire consequences.
Like we're on this runaway train, focused on going faster and faster,
Yeah,
but we haven't really thought about where the tracks end.
exactly. And the other point that stands out is that everything's connected. It's not just population or resources or pollution. It's how all of these systems interact, influence each other.
A giant web you pull on one thread.
And the whole structure's affected.
Yeah, I get that.
And I think that's one of the biggest challenges, honestly. It requires this holistic systems thinking approach, which is tough to achieve in our, fragmented world.
That makes sense. So before we started recording, we were talking about some of the more, well, hopeful aspects of Lakeman's work, things like those technological innovations in food production and global initiatives like the Belt and Road Initiative. I'd love to learn more about those potential solutions. Could you elaborate a bit?
Absolutely. Lakeman's a big advocate for using technology to address these limits, and he sees a lot of potential in, like I said, aquaponics and sea farming. They move us away from traditional land-based agriculture, which is becoming increasingly vulnerable, to climate change, resource depletion.
It's like we're moving towards a future where food production
Mm-hmm.
is more integrated with our ecosystems,
Right.
not trying to just dominate and control them.
Precisely. Working with nature, not against it. And these innovations have the potential to not just increase food production, but actually reduce our environmental footprint. Take aquaponics, for example, raising fish and plants together in that closed loop. It's more efficient, more sustainable, less water, less land, fewer chemicals.
I'm really fascinated by this idea of like mimicking natural ecosystems to find solutions. What about sea farming? What are the benefits there?
Well, sea farming can provide a much more sustainable source of protein than land-based livestock. Fish and shellfish are incredibly efficient at converting feed into protein. They require far less water, less land than raising cattle or pigs. And then there's seaweed, a staple in lots of Asian cuisines, but it absorbs carbon dioxide as it grows, which could help mitigate climate change. Plus, it can be used as a biofuel, as a fertilizer. It's an incredibly versatile resource.
So we need to be looking to the oceans as a key part of the solution here. But shifting gears again, I want to go back to Lakeman's perspective on the Belt and Road Initiative for a second. It's this massive project, could reshape global trade, infrastructure. How does he see it contributing to a more sustainable future?
He argues that the Belt and Road Initiative, with its focus on infrastructure in developing countries, it could be crucial for supporting a more distributed and a more sustainable population, improving transportation networks, energy systems, communication infrastructure. It can help reduce poverty, increase access to resources, promote economic development in regions that have been, well, historically marginalized.
So it's not just about roads and bridges. It's about creating opportunities for people to thrive in a more balanced, more sustainable way.
Exactly. And he sees this as especially important in the context of, population growth. As populations increase, we have to ensure we're creating opportunities for people to live and work in a way that doesn't overload resources or contribute to environmental damage.
Distributing growth more equitably.
And sustainably across the globe.
Yeah, that makes sense. But of course, any large-scale project like this, there are going to be potential drawbacks. What concerns does Lakeman address?
He acknowledges that there are, legitimate concerns about the environmental and social impacts of a project this massive. There are risks of habitat destruction, pollution, displacement of communities. But he argues that these risks can be mitigated through careful planning, robust environmental safeguards, and a commitment to engaging with local communities.
So he's advocating for a nuanced approach, recognizing both the potential benefits and risks.
Exactly. It's about finding a balance between economic development, environmental protection, and social equity, which is, it's not easy. But he believes that the Belt and Road Initiative, if it's done right, it could be a model for sustainable development in the 21st century.
That's a pretty optimistic perspective.
Yeah.
But there are critiques of the Belt and Road Initiative, right? Some argue that it's mainly driven by China's geopolitical ambitions, not a genuine desire for global sustainability.
That's true, and Lakeman acknowledges those criticisms. He doesn't shy away from the complexities or the political realities. But his overall assessment is that the Belt and Road Initiative, despite its flaws, it presents this unique opportunity to address some of the challenges posed by the limits to growth.
So it's about finding that path forward, balancing economic development with environmental sustainability, with social justice, recognizing that these challenges are all interconnected.
Exactly.
And seeking solutions that benefit both people and the planet.
Precisely. And Lakeman's work reminds us that achieving that balance, it requires us to be willing to think differently, to challenge our assumptions, and to embrace new ways of doing things.
It's about looking beyond the immediate horizon, envisioning a future where we're living in harmony with the planet, not at its expense.
Exactly. And I think that's where the real power of his work lies, in its ability to inspire us, to imagine and create a more sustainable future.
So you've shared some fascinating insights here. What resonates most with you personally? What are your initial reactions to these ideas?
Honestly, I'm really drawn to that idea of working with natural systems, not against them. Like you said, aquaponics, sea farming. Those feel like steps in the right direction, finding that balance between our needs and the planet's limits.
Yeah, absolutely. But moving from concepts to reality, are there any examples of these solutions actually working? Any, success stories that give you hope?
Oh, definitely. There are actually quite a few inspiring projects popping up all over the world. When it comes to aquaponics, there's this growing movement of urban farms using it to produce fresh food right in cities, densely populated areas. Some are even integrating aquaponics into community centers, schools. It's really cool. You create this closed loop system, provides food, education, a connection to nature all in one.
That's fantastic. Bringing food production closer to home, educating the next generation. I love it. What about sea farming? Any large-scale examples there?
Off the coast of China and Japan, they've got large-scale seaweed farms. They're not just producing food. They're actually helping to clean up excess nutrients in the water.
Oh, interesting.
Seaweed absorbs things like nitrogen and phosphorus, which can prevent harmful algal blooms, improve water quality overall. So it's a win-win.
It's not just producing more. It's like restoring balance to these ecosystems we've messed up. Speaking of restoring balance, we talked about the challenges of exceeding the Earth's carrying capacity. And you mentioned that Lakeman sees potential in technology to actually increase that capacity. What does he mean by that?
He believes that technology can help us use resources more efficiently, reduce our footprint, even create new sources of food and energy. For example, advances in renewable energy, solar, wind power allow us to generate electricity without relying on those finite fossil fuels. And developments in material science. We're seeing lighter, stronger, more durable materials that require less energy to produce and transport.
So we're decoupling economic growth from environmental impact. That's been the goal all along, hasn't it?
It has, but technology alone isn't enough. We need to shift our mindsets, too, our consumption patterns.
Right.
Lakeman emphasizes that technology is just part of the equation. We need to change our behaviors, our values, our relationship with the natural world. He talks about shifting to a more circular economy, where we reduce waste, reuse materials, regenerate natural systems.
Moving away from that. Take, make, dispose model. That's been, kind of our default for so long.
Exactly. Closing the loop, creating a more sustainable system, one that's more resilient too.
That's a whole mindset shift, isn't it? From extraction and consumption to stewardship to regeneration.
Exactly. Recognizing that we're all interconnected. Our actions have consequences for the planet and for future generations.
It's a call to action for all of us, not just governments, corporations, individuals too, making conscious choices every day.
Absolutely. Reducing our plastic use, supporting local farmers, advocating for policies that promote sustainability. Every action matters.
Creating a ripple effect. And I think Lakeman's work is so important because it connects those global challenges to our individual choices. We're not just passive bystanders. We can be part of the solution.
I completely agree. And even though the challenges are huge, I find hope in the fact that more and more people are aware of these issues and they're working to create that more sustainable future.
I feel that hope too. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I have one final question for you. What's the one key takeaway you want our listener to walk away with?
I think the most important thing to remember is that the limits to growth are real, but they're not insurmountable. We have the knowledge, we have the technology, and we have the ingenuity to create that more sustainable future. But it requires us to be willing to challenge how we think, how we do things, and to act collectively for the well-being of both people and the planet.
That's a powerful message. Thank you. It's been a pleasure exploring these issues with you.
The pleasure was mine. These conversations are always so inspiring.
And to our listener, thank you for joining us on this, well, intellectual journey. We hope this deep dive has given you some valuable insights and maybe a renewed sense of hope for the future. Remember, the choices we make today, they shape the world of tomorrow. Let's choose wisely.
Yeah, I think I'm with you there. It's that idea of like working with nature that really resonates. Aquaponics, sea farming, those just feel like the right way to go,
Yeah.
finding that balance. But I mean, are there actual examples of this stuff working? Like real world success stories, you know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. Tons of inspiring projects out there all over the place. For aquaponics, like I said, you've got all these urban farms popping up, using it to grow food right in the cities. And some are even taking it a step further, integrating aquaponics into community centers, schools. It's amazing you create this closed loop system that provides food, education, a connection to nature, all in one, man.
That's so cool, bringing food production back into our communities and teaching the next generation about sustainability. Love it. What about sea farming? Any big projects out there? Oh, yeah, definitely. Off the coast of China and Japan, they have these massive seaweed farms. And they're not just growing food, they're also helping to clean up the water.
Really?
Yeah, seaweed absorbs all those excess nutrients, nitrogen, phosphorus, all that stuff. Helps prevent those harmful algal blooms. Improves water quality overall.
So it's a win-win, not just producing more food, but actually restoring balance to these ecosystems, which, we kind of messed up. Speaking of restoring balance, we've talked a lot about, the limits of the Earth's carrying capacity. And I remember you mentioned that Lakeman, he sees technology as a way to potentially increase that capacity. What did he mean by that?
Well, he believes that technology can help us to just use resources more efficiently in general, reduce our environmental footprint even, create entirely new sources of food and energy, like, for example, all the advances in renewable energy, solar, wind power, that kind of thing, allows us to generate electricity without relying on fossil fuels, which are finite, right? And then there are the developments in material science, creating these lighter, stronger materials that require less energy to produce, to transport.
It's like decoupling our economic growth from our environmental impact, which has been the holy grail, hasn't it?
It really has. But even with all these advancements, technology alone isn't going to cut it. We need to change our mindset too, how we consume, how we think about resources.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Lakeman really stresses that technology is a tool, but we need to change our behaviors, our values, how we relate to the natural world. He talks about this shift to a circular economy, reducing waste, reusing materials, regenerating natural systems.
It's about moving away from that old take, make, dispose model. Right?
Exactly.
Closing the loop. Yeah, creating a system that's more sustainable, more resilient.
It's a fundamental shift in how we think.
From just extraction and consumption to stewardship to actually regenerating what we've taken.
It's about recognizing that, we're all connected.
Yeah.
And that our actions have consequences, not just for us, but for the planet, for future generations.
It's a call to action for everyone, not just, governments and corporations, but individuals too, making those conscious choices every day.
Exactly. Choosing to reduce our plastic use, supporting local farmers, advocating for policies that promote sustainability. It all adds up. Every action matters.
It's creating that ripple effect, right? And I think that's what makes Lakeman's work so powerful. It connects those big global challenges to our own choices, our own actions. We're not helpless. We can be part of the solution.
I completely agree. And yeah, the challenges are huge, daunting even. But I do find hope in the fact that more and more people are waking up to these issues. And they're actively working to create a better future.
Yeah, I feel that hope too. So, as we come to the end of this deep dive, I have one last question for you. What's the one thing you want our listener to walk away with, the key takeaway from this whole conversation?
That's a good question. I think the most important thing to remember is that the limits to growth are real, they're there. But that doesn't mean we're doomed. We have the knowledge, we have the technology, and we have the human capacity for ingenuity to create a truly sustainable future. But it takes a willingness to change, to challenge our assumptions, to think differently, to act collectively for the good of everyone, and for the good of the planet.
That's a powerful message. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
It's always inspiring to have these conversations, to think about these complex issues, and to envision a better future. And to our listener, thank you for joining us. We hope you found this deep dive insightful, and maybe even a little bit hopeful. Remember, the choices we make today shape the world of tomorrow. So let's choose wisely.